Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you with another tournament results video. I haven't done one of these in a while. As a matter of fact, the last one I did was all the way back in February, I believe, for Standard. And the reason why is because a lot of the tournaments thereafter, I've been busy with other things, but with this one, I decided, hey, I had a little bit of free time on my hands, so I figured I'd do the tournament results because, A, they were really interesting for the results that we got, and also part and parcel because of B, which is that we had a very different tournament this time around. So this is the Oathkeeper's Watch June limited standard tournament, and what we mean by limited is we only allow decks that were directly supported in set 9. Set 9 of Divines is a bit of a different set, right? It's a non-anime set, so we had a lot of new strategies come out and support for strategies that weren't anime canon. So think some of the new decks like Heart Lure, right? Or support for old decks like Minerva and Ezel. These are good examples here. So we decided to take this limited format and play an entire tournament with that as our only card pool. And to give you more of a reference, these were the decks that were able to be played. You have anything ranging from Superbia, which was the collapse set for Bravern, right? Dayusha itself, because Daikaiser came out in the set, that you go down, you see some of the new ones like Heart Luru here, Sybil's another new one, but then you also some of the classics, right? Alcalibur got a card during this set, so it got to be included. Undercover got to be in this set. So you have a really decent mix of the new and the old here. This is a pretty nice card pool to work with, and it was overall very fun and satisfying tournament, I feel. So with this, you can see that we have some results to go over here, and I'm going to be explaining the basics of the results, how the tournament went, how it felt to play in a limited standard tournament, because now that we don't have the threats of Bofsagada, Bat, Blankmeyer, the 3 Bs, it felt like a lot better. But how so? I'll get into that. And also, we're going to be taking a quick look at the top 4 decks that actually made it to Top Cut in this standard tournament, which will be a nice thing as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Let's begin. So starting with the overall results here, you can see there was quite a bit of diversity here. Sybil and Shoujo were very popular choices. This isn't a surprise on Sybil's, and Shoujo I think was a little bit much because Shoujo hadn't been relevant for a while, and it's a very skill-intensive deck, so I think it's a little daring to bring Shoujo into Top Cut, and none of them managed to, but oddly, neither did Sybil. Sybil is one of the new Set 9 decks, and it was perceived as potentially the best of the Set 9 decks, being able to achieve 5 attacks, get a boatload of card advantage, and some really nice numbers to go with it, especially because one of those attacks is a Vanguard swing, which you can restore a drive on it. So think of it as like a much more resource conscientious version of Varga-Dragras, right? That's kind of what Sybil is, which thematically kind of makes sense. Sybil, however, didn't do too well in this tournament. I'm not quite sure why. I believe if I had to take a guess, it's because people had anticipated Sybil coming into this tournament, so they were rather prepared for that matchup. And as a result, Sybil may have even gotten counterpicked in some ways. I know I counterpicked Sybil a little bit with my choice here, but we'll get into that a little bit later. After that, we have Nebula Knights and Minerva. So right after the Dragon Empire, we have some Counter Sanctuary. Now, Nebula Knights is one of the new ones from Set 9, and honestly, seeing 3 Nebula Knights here isn't that surprising in that it's a really cool deck, but it's also surprising because it's not, to me, that strong of a deck at first glance. It requires a lot of setup, and its gimmicks are a little bit on the avant-garde side because it has this blend of field board and also trying to get some deck stacks here and there in minor elements, and then once you get serious as Persona Ride, you get the big deck stack, which makes you feel like you're doing like some Hexa Orb kind of stuff, right? So it's a weird smorgasbord of different effects, right? And it's kind of hard to bring it all together, but we actually had some really strong Nebula Knight pilots. One of them actually almost made it to Top Cut, in fact, so that's pretty impressive. Speaking of Top Cut, one of the Minerva players actually did make it to Top Cut. They made it all the way to the finals, and Minerva proved itself to be a very powerful deck. Now, at first, I wasn't too confident in Minerva because I felt that Minerva lacked the raw card advantage to survive and needed to kind of rely on that grade 4 burst turn in order to succeed. But surprisingly enough, Minerva had a lot of consistency tools and could farm more hand than I initially surmised, so Minerva could do very well, and one of them did make it to Top Cut, as I said. Now, Mythiarch at 2, this one I actually thought more people would get on because Mythiarch is low-key insane. Early Rush is super good in a format like this where you can just completely aggro your opponent and try to take him out quickly with some sack, right? And Mythiarch is very good at that, especially because Mythiarch also includes elements of Paralyze and Discard against the opponent. So your opponent's having to deal from disruptive and aggressive elements from all sides. So It felt like a really good complete picture there, and with the recent support it became more consistent than ever. So I'm not quite sure more people didn't bring Mythiarch. It may be because people just didn't really care for it too much, but yeah, we only had 2 Mythiarch. None of them managed to convert though. Then we have Daikaiser at 2. Daikaiser is one of the most disappointing decks. It looked really cool at first glance, right? And it seemed like Daikaiser might have had potential, but Daikaiser actively fights against its own archetype. The D-Legion ability is neat in concept, but you want to Persona Ride more than D-Legion, I feel, because Dayusha on Persona Ride just felt like it was better numbers. And Daikaiser's ultimate skill, Energy Blasting 3 to guard break, and then being able to nullify Sentinels if you get rid of the core Kaiser, is such a limited and telegraphed skill that it's really hard for the opponent to die to that. I feel like Daikaiser is just very depressing that way. Like, probably one of the only cards that came out from this set that felt like really good was Shadow Kaiser. Shadow Kaiser gave the deck not just a 23k beater, but Shadow Kaiser was a 10k power up defensively on either player's turn. So this meant that you could, whether it was on the rear circle or in the hand, you could drop it much like the Winter Dragon and give more power to your Vanguard for that battle. So it was a good defense to try and help you out in the early game, and you could theoretically grade 2 game with this deck now because of that. But still, I think Daikaiser didn't add hardly anything, and I feel this is going to be sad to say, I feel like pure Dayusha is still probably the optimal way to play D-Robo. So I feel really bad for Daikaiser, but that's just the reality of what we're at right now. Alcalibra. Now, Alcalibra is one that is fairly threatening in this tournament because it's one of the OGs relative to a lot of these other decks. It came out in set 4, and it's been a pretty solid deck all throughout. Never really a top tier deck, but always sort of skirting that line. It felt like really huge numbers, strong consistency tools, access to revive options to counteract control elements. It was just a really fundamentally solid deck. It didn't do too well in this tournament though, and I'm not quite sure if that was because of bad matchups or if Alcalibra just isn't as impressive as it may seem at first glance, because other decks like Sybil can present some really strong effing offense too. So Alcalibra may not have looked as impressive there. Also, Alcalibra is a little bit piece reliant in order to get its offense off, whereas some of the other decks like Sybil are less piece reliant. So I think that's the reason why people had analyzed that Sybil been the better pick, even though it didn't work out well for them. Still, Alcalibra, pretty strong deck after this tournament, but it just didn't really get where it needed to go. Heart Lure. Now, one of the Heart Lures did make it a top cut, and Heart Lure was one of the most impressive decks in this tournament cycle. I think, personally, Heart Lure is the strongest of the set 9 decks. I think it's even stronger than Sybil, personally. And the reason why is because Heart Lure just has an insane amount of consistency and card advantage. With Heart Lure's own skill, once you get those toy box set up, you can get a ton of power. 3 toy boxes is 5,000 power to your front row. And then if that wasn't enough, for each toy box, you can call one of your toys from the soul to the field for just a mere Energy Blast 3. So you could theoretically EB3 to +4. That is absolutely giga bonkers. And then Heart Lure himself incorporates a double restand of the front row for a 5 attack turn to 6 if you're using the Shark technically. And then it also gets an extra drive check and more power. It's like, there's just so much pressure. And because you're constantly deck thinning, it's one of those decks that's really good at deck compression. So that triple drive could be very scary. And because it can also use its field to intercept with, every turn you can use your field as extra guard supplementation. It goes into the drop zone, and then you take it from the drop zone back into the soul, and then from the soul onto the field. It's just a perfect circle. Heart Lure does have a couple of issues though. Occasionally it can whiff on toys, which can be a little sad for it. And then on top of that, Heart Lure is still, despite what I said there, if Heart Lure isn't seeing the nuts on its drive checks, its defense is a little bit lacking. It can be kind of a glass cannon, at least compared to some of the more stable strategies out here in this format. So Heart Lure, though, very strong. The offense is super insane, and Heart Lure players were both running Volnude because they understood that the rear guards that you restood, one had a Battle Door and the other one had a Natty Crit, both of which are fantastic targets for double dipping with Volnude. So I think they made a really good choice of that OT, and they were clearly trying to lab it out to the best of their ability. And one almost made a top cut, and the other one did make it a top cut. So Heart Lure, I think, converted quite well, relatively speaking. Then we have 8 others. There's a lot of decks in here, but the only ones I'm going to talk about are the ones that actually made it to top cut, because there actually was a couple that made it to top cut, but I'll actually save that for when we get into there, because after this list we got the top 4 right here. So the top 4 consisted of Undercover, Minerva, Heart Lure, and Stahi Raja. What a random top 4. This is the joy of the limited format right here. Other decks really did get to shine in this format, and it was really cool. So let's go ahead and take it from the bottom to the top. So over in 4th place here is Stahiraja. Stahiraja was the Bug Priest man. He came out in set 3, which funnily enough, same as Undercover. But the set 3 Stahiraja was always a pretty decent control deck. It had the ability to take away power and drive from your opponent's Vanguard and know they couldn't be ready to get past it. It had a lot of revival options. It was a strong 5-attack turn and good resource engines. It's just a fundamentally sound deck with a strong X factor in reducing power and drive for the opponent. So they were easier to be taken out. They didn't hit as hard, and because of the lack of drive, they just didn't have card advantage to drive check pressure and also to have some defense against you. So yeah, good stuff. This made it far. As a matter of fact, it made it to the top 2 as Swiss, so it was a Swiss finalist as well. Barely getting beaten out by Undercover, but it was a very strong Swiss game, and you guys can actually see that Swiss game on my channel in the recent stream I did where I was discussing the set 10, set 11 reveals. I also mentioned this fight, right? Because we had it on stream. We were like, hey, you know what? We're both here. We might as well just do it on stream in front of a live audience. So if you're interested in how that fight went, you can go ahead and check that out. Now, in 3rd place was the Heart Lure player, that top by Anak. Let's go, baby chicken. Now, Anak here, he threw down a very solid version of Heart Lure, which we're going to get to in a moment because the next 4 entries have the deck list to all of them. But then in top 2, you have Nodote leading the charge with Minerva. Very strong list, just able to play its game plan and just burst through most of the competition. And by the grace of God, I made it to number 1. So I played Undercover, and I'm going to explain why I brought Undercover when we get to my list, but Undercover was a surprisingly great choice in this format. Undercover did a lot, dog. Quick sippy there. So Undercover is such a fundamentally sound deck. It has strong attack, strong recursion, strong consistency, great deck compression. It's one of its key elements. And because of the extra drive checks and other X variables to it, this deck just had a lot of things set for it, right? It's not the most exceptional deck, I feel. It's like a jack of many trades, but master of none. But, you know, it still did really good, obviously, right? Now, let's go ahead and talk more in detail about the top 4 decks. So, first off, we have Maz's Stahiraja deck. Now, Maz is a fantastic pilot of anything bug related, so it's no wonder he made it to top cut with bugs, just as he made it to top cut with Station over in the deluxe tournament, right? Now, Maz is running a very typical build here, right? You get a lot of your nice generic Stoicheia pieces here. You've got your Alvinas to recur back orders, of which you have 2 very strong orders. Stahiraja is a normal order centric deck because you have the 2 scripture orders that you're supposed to play every single turn, Stahiraja allowing you to play both. And then from there, you have a lot of options for beatdown resources and also defense. This thing right here, this grade 3 is really interesting because when your Vanguard is being attacked by rearguard, you can retire the unit in order to reduce your opponent's attacking unit's power by their original power. So it was a very interesting defensive card. This was a scripture searcher. This can revive back these key cards. Remember, this retires itself, and this is a searcher that's on place whenever, so you can just go ahead and recur it back off of Asperonia. And also by milling, you can mill some key cards because Stoicheia has some good revival options here. And then this card converts itself from the field into the soul to draw a card, so, you know, very good stuff there. Prize Trident for countercharge. Now, I actually didn't notice he was playing Prize Trident in our game, but I guess Prize Trident is there because he runs into a little bit of a CB choke here, which I guess I can kind of see the argument for the CB choke here because you do want to CB for Scriptures, Asperonia, you CB for Stahiraja, of course, right? You do Counterblast for a lot of things, but it seems like aside from that, the resource is quite healthy. You have a lot of ways to build into Soul to make up for the Soul Blast 2 skill on one of your Scriptures. You can revive back one of these cards with this Scripture as well, so even more recursion, and then the energy is being very healthily used because both this grade 2 and Alvina use energy when they're placed, and you know, that's about it. So it should be just enough to see a good use of your energy here. So overall, very fundamentally sound deck. I feel like this deck definitely had the element of surprise here because no one really understood Stahiraja. Even me, who like when I fought against this thing, I understood what Stahiraja could do, but I really underestimated this deck's numbers. This deck was hitting for like 40 to 50k columns against a 10k base value because remember, you lose 3k base from the skill of one of your Scriptures. So this one right here, to be specific, it was really hard to guard, but thankfully, there was a tech choice that really helped me out in this matchup and many of the other matchups here, right? As a matter of fact, all the matchups in this top 4 played into that choice, and I had to play all these top 4s because I played against this in Swiss, and then I played the next 2 decks in the top cut, one for semis and one for finals, right? So we're going to get into that. Now, for the third best deck, we had Heart Luru here. Heart Luru is a deck that really builds itself. There's not a lot of build variety with Heart Luru, so even though it seemed like Anak did try some build variety to an extent. So let's see some of the things he's running. Obviously, he's running the Heart Lure Ride Line, of course. Now, the Ride Line gets you your toys, and then, of course, these are cards that you would want to call from the soul afterwards. The Grade 1 Nutcracker is kind of a double search for your Happy Toys, so that's how you get to the 3 or more to give 5,000 to your front row, and the Happy Toys means that you can get like a +3 to the field, so very strong there. The Shark Coaster, meanwhile, is a restand target, and when it's done attacking your rear guard, it can Soul Blast to restand itself. So Shark Coaster there is what allows you to get a 6 attack turn, but you have to be attacking a rear guard on the first one, so it's sort of mitigated by that alone. Heart Lure himself, of course, is the big dog, and Heart Lure, I already mentioned why he's really strong. Massive plussing to the field, up to +4. You get a 5th plus if you get the extra drive check. You get a double restand. You're able to give them extra power-ups when you do so, and then, of course, there's the front row power-up, which even he benefits from. There's just so much going on with Heart Lure. It's just so fundamentally strong. Some of the rear guards of note here. So this is the Dragon. The Dragon is a card that not only gets you a draw and also power by a CB, but probably the biggest thing about the Dragon is that when you restand it from Heart Lure, it gets an extra critical. So you have automatic critical pressure from this Dragon. This Bear, meanwhile, is another fantastic stand target. The other one you want to stand because it has a Battle Door skill when you stand it by Heart Lure's effects. Also, it's a card that can recur back your toy box from the damage zone. So if you're unlucky enough to damage check one of these, Bear will get it back to you. I mean, just think about how long it took for some other decks to get back these kind of key recursion pieces. Like ODM did get that initially, right? But this one just got to wrap the back because this is just that sound of a deck. This deck just built itself from turn 1. Now you've got yourself Valak, just ace unit, nothing really to say here. Block Course. Now, Block Course, I feel, is a card that isn't going to be here forever. We play it right now because we need to max out our Happy Toys names, but if it weren't for that, Block Course would probably get the boot because all Block Course is a 10k interceptor from the field. That's all it does. Doesn't really have any more utility aside from that 10k intercept, but at least it gives you decent value, and it's one of the ways where Heart Lure can defend itself using its fields, and then after that field goes to the drop zone, I do the loop thing I mentioned before, right? Well, they do the loop thing, not me. I didn't play this deck. Oh man, I'm goofing. So the Block Course is pretty okay, but it's not that useful. This Bunny, meanwhile, is pretty insane. So not only is the Bunny a top 3 searcher for a card in the soul, so you get something easiest, freest soul charging and deck filtering, but then Bunny can restand itself from the back row left rear circle, so it substantiates a huge column, and this is a column that you do in tandem with Dragons. So not only is this going to be the extra critical column, so the most dangerous one, it also has the double booster going with it, so even more numbers. Oh, the joy. I love standard format. Then we've got this card right here. So this is Avarice Rester. Avarice Rester, it's something you'd probably remember from Odium. I mean, we know what Avarice Rester is for. It's supposed to dump an order and then get it in there, right? So there's not really anything too surprising about that. Then, of course, you've got the Garnet. Now, this Garnet, not the Garnet, Amethyst. Now, Amethyst Cat is spent to countercharge, which I can kind of see why you want to countercharge. You have to CB for a few things here, but not that many things. So I feel like it might have been a little bit more for the shield value personally, because this deck, as I said before, is a little fragile on shield value. So this can get you the 20k shield, but it is a little weird because you may end up calling these cards, and you also remove TT from the skill of Nutcracker. So I feel like that might have not been proper. I don't know about running Amethyst personally. It just seems so limited in this deck, right? And surely there'd be a better generic option to run. I know Dark State's generics are kind of laughable. I mean, this was the latest thing we got that was good in a long time, just this and Philia, right? But heck, even if you did just do Philia, I think Philia would have been better in this case, because playing a Happy Toys, I think, procs Philia because you're still playing in order that turn. So yeah, I don't know what to say about this. This seemed like a really avant-garde choice, and Avarice Rester is kind of reached, but I get it. And then from there, you just have your deck staples, you have 4 of your order, and then your triggers, yada yada, right? Simple stuff there. So overall, very strong list. I'm a little questioning on this choice here, but I can definitely see why this made it all the way up to the top cut, because it just goes for that super strong beatdown that's really hard to stop. Then over in the top 2, one of the finalists was Minerva. Now, Minerva here had a lot going on for it. Of course, we have our ride line, which is the same as always. It's just the generic Genesis ride line, but this Genesis ride line is very dual utility, because not only does it get you upwards of 4 cards in the soul, of which you want several cards in the soul if you can help it, which when I played in the finals, this managed to see some really good soul targets, so it looked very convincing to me. But also these cards can call themselves back when they're soul blasted, so you get basically a +4 to soul, and then you can get a theoretical +2 to the field later on, although it's very delayed gratification to get there, but still very well designed ride line, I'd say, one of the more powerful ones. Then you have the main deck proper. Now this is Almighty Minerva. Almighty Minerva, 10,000 power to front row. You get to restand the Vanguard itself, and you also can recall cards and also restand this rear guard. So this deck typically achieves a 6 attack turn, and not only is it a 6 attack turn, but it's a 6 attack turn on a 10k to front row and a massive Vanguard doing a total of 4 drive checks, 3 on the first go round and then 1 on the second go round. This deck has a lot of power pressure, but there's also so many generic tools here that can be utilized because the Keter in recent times has bounced back on its generic tool issue, right? So of course we're running Biscottis because we don't really use energy in this deck too much, so Biscotti is just a must-have. Then you have Coco here. Now Coco, because this is a clan encounter deck, you can use Coco. Coco's is absolutely giga strong. Being able to put a card from hand to the soul, which is already plus to the soul, then you look at the 2 cop cards of your deck. You add one to the hand like your effing Sergown, and the other one can either go into the soul or you can keep it on top of the deck. So it's either a deck stack or even more soul for you, and it's deck filtering. So it's just so good, right? Coco is also a potential 18k booster or beater if your opponent checks a trigger, or a 15k shield if your opponent checks a trigger. So think of it as like the Festival Collection Great Thieves from way back when, the ones that had Sajas and whatnot, but even stronger because these have a 95k shield on top of that. They're running a Topaz. Now, Topaz, I do feel, is probably the one misstep in these generics here, because remember what I said before about how these ride line cards call themselves back out to the field? That means Topaz can't remove them from the dropper soul. So I feel like it's just a misallocation of like a deck space, which you could have used this deck space for something different, like maxing out Biscotti, which is how I would have personally taken it. But still, it's a decent enough choice, and I guess because it's only one a game, you may be able to use it once that game, but it doesn't feel optimal to me. Now, another one of the generics I think is really good is this new order for Nebula Knights, which is generic. This first effect is anyway. You can play it from the drop zone if you so choose. So it's either a hand or drop zone, which means it's an excellent discard fodder. And then you can bind the card in order to look at the top 7 cards of your deck and call anything to the field. Just call a card to the field. So good there. I mean, I'm not even going to cap with y'all. I'm so appreciative of this order because it makes Keter feel like Keter again. Like, too many times now in recent days, we've had Keter decks that kind of had an issue with building back board because they were moving away from that. And I felt like it was appalling to move away from that. We shouldn't have done that at all. So this order right here helps bring us back to our roots there. So I'm very happy to see it. And it's also got really good applications here because you want to see Angelica for your counter charger and also a potential multi-attack avenue from its own Soul Blast. This is the most important rear guard of your deck because it sets up your cards into soul, and it's also a pretty powerful restander on top of that. And then you could also try to search out something like Coco, and then Coco could do some more deck filtering and soul building, so it's really good. You could also try to call out Dissection Angel. Now, Dissection Angel is Painkiller Plus. It's one of those fusion cards as we've been getting in recent days. Dissection Angel allows you to Soul Blast Retire in order to draw a card just like Painkiller, but it also can Soul Blast 2 when you check a trigger in order to give itself 5,000 power and countercharge 1. That's really good because this deck can counterblast a crap ton, and so this gives you another way to countercharge, and not just on Angelica. And because you build up a lot of soul in this deck because it's Genesis, you do have the soul to be able to use this feasibly. Also, one thing that's really worth noting about this card is that if you are boosting the Vanguard with it, this can get a little bit tricky because while you're boosting the Vanguard with it, if you do check a trigger and you Soul Blast 2 for the 5k and the countercharge, that 5k is going to apply to that Vanguard swing. So whereas your opponent, like let's say that your opponent is at 13, right, and they guard up to like 28 on like a 23 swing or something, which is possible because this is going to be a 10k booster, gets a 2k continuously. The opponent's at grade 3 or greater, so this will be like a 23, right? If they guard up 28, right, and it's they guard starting at 28, 38, right? Sorry, my analogy is starting to fall apart here, but basically they 2 to pass it by a 5k increment difference, right? This can make a trigger a 1 to pass, essentially, because of the extra power up. So yeah, be careful of that. Really strong resource card. I definitely agree with using this. Fire Regal is here. This can call off the top 5 or get you a draw. It's just a really strong generic card because you do a lot of soul blasting in this deck. If you put it into soul off of like your ride line skill or something, it'll still see value in the drop zone. And this helps this deck even more with just build board. It's a good Keter deck that way. Build board. Even running the main deck copies of the Melissa, which I see they're not running main deck copies of Chamomile, which I get because this is a re-standard, which is superior to Chamomile's multi-attack from Soul. So I think they took out the Chamomiles to make room for this, and you could also recur it back with a couple of cards. One thing that's kind of interesting is that this deck seems to be a little less predicated on some of the preordained Minerva support cards from back in the day. So think of Thausius or Reverlim, right? They were classic staples of the strategy, but they just took it a very different way and played a lot of generics here. And I think that ultimately worked out better because it gave them a better control matchup. And while control may have not been that popular here, it did mean that they could build board even in case they did run into a control matchup, because this deck needs to go quickly and kill. So if I was playing this deck, I refuse to get unlucky with it. I refuse to not get full board set up when you're trying to go in for the kill, because I'll call triggers if you have to, dog. You just need to kill quickly with Minerva because it doesn't get that much hand advantage, but it did surprisingly get some supplementation here. Draws from here, here, and here does get it a decent amount of hand. I remember playing this in the finals and seeing that it did accrue a decent amount of hand, but unfortunately it was still very vulnerable to the rush. He had to keep a lot of the pieces in the hand there, so I was rushing like crazy and brought it up to 5 almost immediately. So the deck did run into a little bit of an issue there game plan wise, and it also opted to go second in that matchup because Minerva needs the opponent to be great through greater to really get going, but because I'm playing a deck that likes to go first, it kind of like worked against them ultimately. So really solid deck. It's unfortunate it didn't make it all the way, but it came oh so close, and I think we should praise it for that. Finally, we've got my deck. So my deck here, and let me go ahead and get the visual view on it. This is Mordalium. So Undercover as a strategy was not, I mean, I'm going to make a joke here, but it kind of went undercover. It was under the radar for the entire format here. No one really thought about Undercover. I mean, case in point here, when you look at this chart, it was among the 8 others, just like Stahir Raja. So no one else brought this thing except me. So why did I bring Undercover? So I brought Undercover for 3 reasons. One, I wanted a deck that was very consistent and fundamentally sound. So because we were dealing with like a 7-round format here, I needed a deck that would be able to see the cards they need to see turn after turn after turn after turn. So case in point, that's what I did with Undercover. Undercover can always search its pieces from the deck. It has multiple searchers to go with it, right? You can search from Viola, you can search from Diarra, you can search from Mordalion himself, you can even dig from Saragon, right? So half of your deck gets the other half of your deck. Then reason number 2 for Undercover is that Undercover has insane amount of deck compression. Because of the ability to put a lot of Undercover gauges, you're filtering out a lot of your normal units, and you're filtering out even further with some of the aforementioned effects that I mentioned before. So Undercover should be having very devastating drive checks, and I wanted to mollywop the opponent with some really strong drives, and it ended up working. I saw a lot of triggers during this tournament, dude, because that deck compression comes into play, and I even saw over trigger in about half of my games, because when you deck compress that heavily, the over trigger is going to come up. And I think this is one of the things that Bushiroad didn't count on, is that as the format goes on, the over trigger becomes more of a problem, not less of a problem, more of a problem, because it's becoming less and less likely that you check it's becoming more and more likely that you check the sucker. It was less likely in the beginning. Now over trigger seems to happen like once every 2 or 3 games in standard format, and it's very much a bummer here. Still, nevertheless, the third and final reason, and this is one of the most interesting reasons for why I played this deck, is because of Diarra. So Diarra's skill lets you CB1 if you have a Shadow Paladin or Undercover Vanguard, and you look at the top 5 cards of the deck to add a Shadow Paladin or Undercover unit to the hand, right? This can add anything in your Undercover archetype, of course, including your Persona, right? But the main thing that I wanted to add off of this was Perfect Guards, because Esros is a Shadow Paladin, and she can be searched with Diarra. So we have perhaps the only deck in here, right? The only deck here which had this kind of PG searchability at his disposal, and that's absolutely nuts. This helped me out so much in tournament play. Right away in round 1, I fought against Sybil, and Sybil hit Dragveda offensively against me, and I was on the edge, right? So they attacked me 3 times, and each time they asked PG or GG, and because of Diarra, I had the 3 PGs. Herminia demanded a lot of PGs from me. Minerva was going to demand PGs from me, but, you know, OTCG actually ended up stopping that game prematurely, unfortunately. It was a bit of an anticlimactic finals, unfortunately. The PGs helped me out against Harluru a ton, because Harluru was hitting massively big. Helped me out in this deck as well. I had to use all my PGs just to stave off the turn 4 power lines of Stahiraja, right? So these PGs made the difference between success and failure. Being able to search them out was mission critical in this deck. So the winning image here was to decompress and filter out your deck into your fundamental pieces. You filter out your units, then you filter out your PGs, and then you filter out your orders, and then you should be hitting nothing but triggers on the drive checks, or at least mostly triggers on the drive checks. On the clapback, Mordalion gets really big now, because Mordalion can give 5,000 power to all of your units if you've got 3 or more Monitor Tries in the order zone. Previously, this was a little bit janky because you only ensure 2 Monitor Tries from the effects of your ride line, your grade 1, your grade 2. But now, because of Viola is the new card. This is the one that we got in set 9, and it's the one that made Mordalion technically legal for this limited format. So thank you, baby boo. Her effect lets you Energy Blast 2 to discard a Monitor Tries from the deck. Absolute cinema. Absolute effing cinema. Just what the deck needed in order to get going there. With that Monitor Tries, I was just completely online. Furthermore, you can Counterblast to add back a Undercover from the gauge to the hand. So even more so, you had some deck compression elements and being able to just like get your cards intermittently. The deck had a recurring unit here with Tigress. Tigress can bounce this up back to the hand, and it can bot deck a card from your drop zone that's a Undercover, so you got some recursion there. That helped me on the deck out game. This is a draw card. It builds soul, and it also gives you counter charge, albeit this energy blast tied in with this energy blast, and this energy blast meant that energy was the choke point of this deck. You had energy used for a lot of cards. And that's why you still kind of want to see Monitor Tries naturally and not need Viola, because if you could do that, you spare yourself a couple of energy. So it's really nice there. But yeah, Energy Blast was the choke point of this deck, and so you had to think about it mightily how you're going to use your energy. It was a very, very cerebral element of this deck. Then from there, it just kind of played itself a little bit. Turn 4 was very consistent. You spit out the field, you go for a 5 attack turn because of Obfuscate being a 4th attacker, and then Mordalion getting a 5th column, right? A 5 attack turn, all these units, all of them are getting plus 5,000 power, and this is with 3 drives that are going to be at least 2 triggers. Very vicious turn 4 offense. And I either won the die roll, or in the times that I lost the die roll, there were a couple times where they wanted to go second. Both Stahiraja here and Minerva wanted to go second. They opted to go second because their game plans needed the opponent to be at grade 3 or greater to get going. But this is definitely a going first deck if you can help it. So overall, Mordalion, a lot more potent than I think people realize. It just had a good game plan going for it. If you were a Keter man, you understood Keter fundamentals, this is definitely one of those decks with like great Keter fundamentals and a couple of X factors because of Diera and Obfuscate. So overall, top notches here. I had a blast playing this deck, and I had a blast playing in this tournament. I think everyone did too. That gets me to the overall sentiments, which is that this limited tournament was a success. People really like playing this limited tournament. Now, a standard reared its ugly head at times, particularly whenever Overtrigger decided a game, as it very much did oftentimes, but that's just in standard in general, right? Relative to the limited format, people enjoyed the diversity of it. The decks were interesting, people got to play things that they genuinely liked, and it made for some really close games, right? And people just weren't as sweaty about it. So it was just a really enjoyable format. So to you, the audience out here, my ending note is I would suggest if you're going to be playing in a tourney, or maybe if you're organizing a tournament, or maybe the TOs in whatever tournament circuit you're in is asking for suggestions, suggest limited standard tournaments. This was an anime set, so this was not a non-anime set, so you had a little bit more fun decks on this one. I'm not sure how well set 10 and 11 will do, because we're gonna get a lot of anime cards in those, but maybe it is worth doing limited standard formats in there too, just to see if you'd be able to have some nice variety and get some cool games in, right? So this might be the way of the future here, depending on how bad our meta is, because I know Boss Sagada is getting hit, but Boss Sagada is still kind of a top dog. Blangdmeyer is running amok, and then there's even like other dumb tier 2 decks that are just like insufferable, right? I feel like this is just one way to keep standard fresh and interesting, but still have a nice competitive mindset, because people actually did build really well in these decks. I mean, case in point, one thing I almost forgot to mention, I'm playing Invigorate Sage. Invigorate Sage is the restand heal, and that's because let's look at this list right here. How many of these decks have multi-attack? This has multi-attack. This has restand multi-attack. This has restand multi-attack. Favredo has restand multi-attack. Heart Lure has it. Sacrifice Glass has it. Hari, does Hari have it? No, I don't think Hari doesn't have it. Sybil definitely has it. Cote Blaze has it. Alcalibra has it. Warble has it. Cryondra has it. Freaking Nebula Knights has it. Ezel, does Ezel have it? Yeah, Ezel I think has it. Minerva definitely has it. Skyruler has it. Stahi Raja has it. Bailstrom has it. Or you get my point. Like over 8% of the decks here had like restands, right? So I'm like, screw it, dog. I'm playing the restand deal, and that saved my ass in this game, and potentially in this game too. Oh man, that was one of the fun parts. In a more limited format, these generics might actually pop up if you can like notice trends in the decks available there. So yeah, it's another reason why these limiteds, they may be the way to go. I had a blast with it. So many other people did too. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of this standard meta analysis for the limited standard format of Standard Set 9. If you guys did like this video, then definitely like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss another one of my uploads. Take care and God bless y'all.